all got quiet very fast. Welcome and good morning. How are you doing? Woo woo. Good morning. I was at Lizzo last night. Yes, I was. I'm Fairuz Ben Youssef. I am one of the co-chairs of the 2022 She Thrives Summit and Dinner. Welcome again. Yes. We are so thrilled to have those of you here with us at the Junior League of Austin, the beautiful Junior League of Austin, and many of you on our virtual platform joining us. We welcome you as well and look forward to having your participation. So, as I said, thank you so much for being here, for taking time out to listen, to engage, to fill your cup with community, with information, with resources. Today's about you. Today is about you for a change. Us ladies do not get enough time and care for us. So I especially want to call out how She Thrives came to be. Before this thing called COVID and the pandemic happened, a very wise young woman by the name of Jaden Beatty, the Chief Development Officer at AGE, had this idea. She said, women are at the heart of caregiving. Women do so much. Women are resilient. We need to do something for women, something about aging. And we said, yeah, boy, you're right. Do you think anyone will come? Well, let's try to recruit a committee, and let's give this a whirl. And last year was the inaugural She Thrives, and it was a bang-up success thanks to Megan Helmbrecht, who just walked in. And to Tamara. Where's my Tamara? There she is. And here we are, year 2. So hats off to Jaden, to Blair, to her entire team, to Suzanne Anderson, the CEO of AGE. We just couldn't have done this without your leadership and the leadership of everybody else that's been involved. So I do want to thank you again for prioritizing yourselves to come here and to learn new things, to reinforce things that your gut already knew. We have an intuition, and sometimes we don't listen to it. But hopefully being here will help you spur more of that, listening to yourself, to be able to maintain our mental, our physical, and our spiritual health, which is so critically important. So our host today, as I said, is AGE of Central Texas, which is a regional nonprofit serving older adults and family caregivers with resources, care, and the support that we all need to thrive. Hi, Janice. So you can learn more about AGE in your program. Hope you all received one. And I really want you to know that personally for me, AGE is an amazing organization. I am a caregiver for my 77-year-old mom who lives with me. I'm also a caregiver for my family, my husband, my daughter, who's a senior in high school. Many of us are in that sandwich generation at one point in time or even now. So I hope that you'll be able to share with your friends about what you learn and about AGE and the many, many resources that are really critical for all of us, men and women, as we get older and as we are caregivers. Now, I really want to take a moment to especially thank all the sponsors, starting with our presenting sponsor, HEB. Woo-woo! They have supported us in so many ways and are tireless, fearless supporters of this community. Their generosity is truly boundless. And I want to give a special hats off to my co-chair, Tamara, and to her friends and colleagues at HEB. Tamara, wave to everybody. You'll get to hear from Tamara later. But I also want to thank every single one of the other sponsors, some of you here in the room. There's so many, it will take too much time, and Jaden says I can't do that right now, but we will later. They are listed in the program. I also want to recognize the incredible team of women who participated on the She Thrives committee for 2022. So if you had a role in our committee, please take a moment to rise so we may acknowledge you and thank you. Lena, I see you. You need to stand. Yes, you do. All of you. Anyone on the committee. Okay. Hello. You're not standing. Okay, so this is a group that doesn't follow instructions, but that's okay. Come on, come on. Let's own it. Let's own it. I'm serious. You need to rise. Thank you. Rise, rise. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Okay, there's Nahid. Nahid is our decor queen. Thank you, Nahid, for what you did as well. And I also want to thank another very special group, Impact Austin. They are, for those of you who don't know, an incredibly amazing, how many years now, Reb, in our community? 20 years of service and leadership to bringing women together, to learn about philanthropy, to learn about amazing causes in our community, and to give back. So I really want to thank them for helping us to spread the word about our event and all that you all do for the community. We have a very full day of great information and activities, so we hope that you will leave knowing more than you do now. And most importantly, we hope you have fun and have a chance to relax and soak in all the information and community that you will build here today. A couple housekeeping things before we get started and announcements. There will be a 10-minute break in between sessions. So after our morning session, there will be a break, another break, and then we will close with the final session. Our vendor fair today will start at 12:30, and we've put several really fun activities together for you that are about self-care, also improving legal and financial health, where you can have a conversation with a financial planner or estate planning attorney to make sure you have the information that you need to make decisions for yourself, your family, and that you can also participate in a mindful movement exercise. So please do visit the age table out front if you haven't signed up for one of those, and or you could do that during a break or during lunch. There's also a fabulous small trail mix bar way back in the back. If you haven't seen it when you came in, we're near the coffee and the waters, so please do enjoy that for some refreshments. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. I am so excited to introduce our sponsor for the first session, the Realistic Resilience, and that is my very dear friend, my sister in doing good, Miss Rebecca Powers. Reb.
Stage right. There we go. Good morning, you all. This is so exciting. I was an attendee last year, and can I just say, with all due respect to those of us who would be considered older, it is wonderful to see many younger women in the crowd. I only wish I had taken responsibility for my own self-care at a younger age, and I would be much more prepared than I am now, but I'm catching up. And thank you for joining us for the Realistic Resilience session. Mental health for women in particular is a top concern throughout the aging and caregiving journey. And today's panel is going to explore the experiences in a woman's life that often impact mental health, offer guidance on how we can maintain our mental health despite life's struggles, and facilitate an honest conversation about the issues of burnout, unrealistic expectations, and about asking for and accepting help. I was introduced to meditation and yoga last year at the ripe age of 67, and it has been game-changing for my physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So much so that I attended a silent meditation and yoga retreat in the Catskill Mountains last spring. I took a huge leap of faith, but I wanted to deepen my practice of both. And I had never taken time for myself to invest in intentional inward self-care. And now I won't give it up. And my family has noticed a positive change in me, which is awesome, because I'm going on another silent retreat in 2023, and they're excited about that. But putting myself first and taking care of me has brought a sense of peace, energy, and joy that I'm just not willing to let go of. Speaking of peace, energy, and joy, our moderator for this conversation is Executive Director of Interfaith Action of Central Texas, Simone Talma Flowers. Yes, I have some more to say. She is known for bringing people of diverse faiths, cultures, and backgrounds together to break down the barriers that divide us. And with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and over 28 years of nonprofit leadership experience, she is well equipped to guide us through this important conversation. So please join me again in welcoming Simone, who will introduce our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us for this first session of She Thrives 2022. We're not in 2020. We're in 2022. You know, our goal for today is really to give you the tools so that you can proactively take care of yourself, your mental health. And we have 3 amazing women who are going to share their expertise in all these different ways. One has research background. One is a practitioner. One is a storyteller. So you're going to get a diverse array of how you can care for yourself. And one thing, too, that I want to make sure we're real clear about is that in this space that we are in, it's going to be a brave space. It's going to be a space where we can share openly, share honestly and sincerely, but also know that when we share, some of the things that we say may trigger. We don't know what, but sometimes when we talk about mental health, it may trigger you. So we just want you to know we're here. It's a safe space, okay? And for those who are joining us virtually, welcome. And with that, because it's virtual too, it's recorded, so, share openly, but, only what can be shared publicly, okay? All right. But before we get started, I'm going to ask Stephanie, who you'll hear more from later, to center us with meditation.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. So to start, find a comfortable seat and, oh yes. How's that? Better? Okay. Find a comfortable seat. So if your legs are crossed and you're comfortable with uncrossing them. Okay. You can uncross your legs and place both feet on the surface beneath it. So if you're at home, if you're on a sofa and have a little ottoman or something, you could put your feet on that. And if you're here on this lovely floor, and feel the connection your feet are making with the ground. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. As Simone said, we're in a brave space. So take a full breath in. We'll collectively breathe in and release it out. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhaling, filling up with the breath. Exhaling, let it go. And 1 more, breathing in. And release. And then just allow your breath to flow at its own natural pace and rhythm. Bring your attention again to that connection that your feet are making with the surface beneath you. There we go. Good. Feel that grounded connection, those roots. Notice your seat connecting to the surface, the chair, sofa, whatever you're sitting on.
and allow your seat to gently press down into that surface to lengthen a little bit higher up through the spine, the top of the head. If you're comfortable, you can take a big shoulder shrug up, back, and down. Allow the shoulders to draw down away from the ears, perhaps creating a little more space in the heart, room for the breath to flow. Now, in this moment, we'll take the opportunity to check in. Notice how your body's feeling today, seeing if you can soften around the eyes, the cheeks, the mouth. You might even move your mouth around to release any holding and tightness in the jaw where we habitually tend to hold tension. Relax your shoulders and throat. Soften the belly. Notice the connection your palms may be making with your lap or the surface beneath you. Legs are heavy and feet are grounded. Taking this moment to notice the body, and then we'll tune into the breath. Notice your next inhale coming in through either your nose or mouth, and your exhale, and whether the breath is coming into and exiting your body in the same place or a different one. You may notice the sensation of the breath, perhaps feeling it more internally in the belly, the ribs, the chest, the throat, or externally at the tip of the nose or your upper lip. You might even hear the sound of your breath, or the sound of the breath of those around you. Or if you're at home, maybe there's somebody else in this space that you can hear. Right, so taking a moment to tune into what we call anchors in meditation, connection to the ground, awareness and sensation in the body, and the breath, to bring yourself into the present moment, which is often a place that is more peaceful than looking into the past or the future. Now take one hand or both hands and place them on your belly. Feel the rise and fall of your breath and the palms with each inhale and exhale. And then take one of the hands on your belly and place it on the center of your chest, what we call the heart center. You might feel the beat of your heart. And then take the other hand and place it on top. So both hands are connected to your center. The heart space, a place of love and compassion, but as we'll learn today, a place of self-compassion for all the hard work that you've been doing in caring for others. You can apply to yourself as well. Take a moment in quiet and stillness to just be right here. Slowly release your hands and open your eyes.
Thank you, Stephanie. And now, I would ask each one of you to introduce yourself. And first, we'll start with Stephanie Haberman, and then Kristen Campbell, and then Joan Asef. So, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Haberman. Oop, the microphone. I'm really so excited to be here. I'm actually not from Texas or Austin, I'm from New Jersey. And I had the opportunity to meet Rebecca, who just spoke before, at a silent retreat up in the Catskills. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm a yoga teacher, and I incorporate meditation techniques and breathing techniques like we just practiced into a lot of my teaching. And I actually came into yoga due to feeling very overwhelmed by caregiving for my children at that time. And I think we'll talk more about that later, but yoga to me became something that gave me a sense of purpose and something that I can do just for myself. It was self-care where I really was neglecting that quite a bit. And I had no idea that I ultimately would be teaching yoga and teaching yoga teachers yoga and talking about yoga and meditation in a an event like this. So it's really been a wonderful path for me. I've taught people from age 3 to 93. I teach my grandmother yoga right now. The primary, I would say, demographic of people that I teach right now are 50, 60 plus. The classes that I teach are very adaptive in nature and also restorative. Restorative yoga helps to really nourish and calm our nervous systems, which have been functioning at such a high level for such a long time that it can have a really negative impact on so many elements of our life, which I think we'll go into. So I'm so pleased to be here today with my amazing panelists and with all of you. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kristen Campbell, and I am a caretaker of two little guys, 5 and soon to be 4. They're 18 months apart. I'm also, I've been in the seat of watching my mom take care of both of her parents and really wearing as a badge of honor the self-sacrifice that it takes to put other people ahead of yourself and not doing that in a really healthy way. It was super unhealthy. And so as one of the cycles that I would like to break, that's one of them. And one of the ways that I'm bringing my experience here today is to talk about my own personal journey with mental health struggles and what I've done about it. You're going to hear about my toolkit. An additional third way that I have been a caretaker is through my lifetime experience or my career over the last 18 years in the nonprofit sector. And in that space, we tend to do a lot of that self-sacrificing. We hold close the missions that we are passionate about, be it domestic violence or pediatric health care, and ultimately can find ourselves in situations where we are working nonstop around the clock on causes that we're passionate about, and often that's to the detriment of our own health, whether that's physically or mentally. And I'll say that yoga has definitely been a part of one of those tools in my toolkit, and that if something I think that I want to make sure that we all take away from here today is that even if you're not paying attention to sort of the mental aspects of what's going on for you, your body is paying attention. And so I really appreciate that moment to sort of center us physically in this space today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joan Asef, and I am a clinical social worker and a clinical professor with the Steve Hicks School of Social Work in the University of Texas at Austin. It's taken me a long time to be able to get all that out of my mouth, so thank you for your patience. I'm also the co-director of our school's GRACE program, where we focus on teaching social work students to work specifically with older adults in placements like Age of Central Texas, who's one of our incredible partners. It is an incredible honor to be here with all of you this morning in this incredible panel as well. My background, as our panelists have shared, is complex and meaningful, and connects so much to a lot of what we'll be talking about today. My mother was diagnosed with cancer when I was 5 years old, so the role changes began early for me in life, and I ultimately was her caregiver at the end of her life at the age of 22, which was atypical for sure. And professionally, I served as a social worker in skilled nursing facilities for close to a decade, which was an honor and also incredibly challenging in many ways, and helped me build the skills to serve and empower and develop resilience and self-care strategies with and in collaboration with so many women and caregivers and family systems. So this is work that is near and dear to me personally and professionally. I also have 2 little ones, though they're not so little anymore, 10 and 12. So I'm in the thick of that caregiving, and which is so joyful and also pulls us in so many directions. And so I am really excited to share both my professional and personal experiences and expertise today. And thank you so much for welcoming me.
Thank you. And as you can see, just an amazing woman from all different perspectives. So this session is focusing on realistic resilience. Know when to go and when to say no. So the first question is going to go out to Joan to share, give us an overview. What is resilience? And why is it important?
Thank you for that complex question, Simone. So, the textbook definition of resilience really is this ability to recover from difficulties quickly. If you look at definitions that are accessible online and so forth, you'll see that word quickly. And I want to challenge that today. That absolutely resilience is this ability to recover and to heal and to grow in the face of incredible challenges. And I know that women are especially good at this, right? We show up, we adapt, we cultivate relationships, and we ultimately are incredibly resilient. And this notion that we must always do this quickly and with great efficiency and with a little attention to self and to our own mental health and health is ultimately too much of a sacrifice, right? It's a concept or approach that leaves us depleted and leaves us without the health and the mental health that we deserve. And so what I'd love to do today in the conversation that we're having, and I know my incredible panelists will help develop this conversation with me and with all of us, is to redefine and expand that definition of resilience. And this is a lot of the work that I did as a therapist, and I forgot to mention that too, spent some time as a clinical therapist with many caregivers, women and men who were in a caregiving role. They were in many roles that required them to kind of chip away at the self, right? To kind of minimize their own needs and ultimately have very little bit of their self and their personal needs left at the end of the day, with all of the roles, all of the demands. And I imagine many of you can connect to this concept, right? Whether you are caregiving, whether you are looking out for someone in your neighborhood, whether you are supporting folks in your faith community, wherever you are and you're giving. And then over time, those really vital parts of our health and mental health, of our identity, begin to atrophy over time. And what happens and what we know is that this chronic stress results in adverse impacts on our health. We know that it can lead to an array of symptoms, especially for women and more pronounced for women, such as gastric issues, irritable bowel syndrome, weight gain, all of these areas that many of us struggle with. We really can link back to that lack of self-care and that lack of attention to kind of the whole mind and the whole body. So I'd love today in this conversation to really expand the definition of resilience and what that looks like. Brene Brown and other social scientists will tell us that resilience really looks more like accepting help. And I'll just leave that out there and see how that feels for some of us, right? Accepting help, what are we talking about? Right. And being vulnerable and saying, I think I feel vulnerable today. I think I'm having a harder time with something. And that is actually part of being resilient. So I'll stop there.
So Joan, can you go ahead and share a little bit more? I mean, and coming out of the pandemic where we have been isolated, and share more about like the effects of isolation.
Absolutely. So it's perfect timing because I've been doing a bit of this research, working on an article for Alzheimer's Texas, and really the impacts of social isolation, which will not surprise many of you, and of course, we're all coming out of it, right? We've all been living in it. Research is telling us that the impacts and effects of social isolation on mental health and health are profound. There's a recent study that equates prolonged social isolation with this similar impacts of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That we really are social creatures. We are meant to be in community, like today, with one another, which is why this is such a joyful experience. And so when we are socially isolated, and again, we all had to make those tough decisions. We didn't have choices during that, the past 2 to 3 years. And we now know that these impacts are profound on our mental health and on our physical health. And so the chronic stress, again, that comes with being socially isolated leaves us ultimately depleted. And research is now showing that social isolation is one of the main risk factors for poor health outcomes, just as much as, or is just as important as getting good sleep, a good diet, social isolation is up there, right, with these risk factors. And so we are seeing primary health care settings now beginning to screen for social isolation, to ask men and women, how are you engaged with others? Do you have a social support network? Are you in contact with others who can support you and connect to your interests and goals? That's how I'd like all screenings to be asked. I doubt they're that comprehensive at this moment, but the fact that these screenings are beginning to occur and that within healthcare research, within healthcare service provision, we're understanding that social connections are essential. They're just as important as the food we eat, the sleep we get, the exercise and other strategies and factors that we know to be important to our health.
Thank you. And Kristen and Stephanie, can you share some steps that you may have to getting out of isolation?
Yeah, I'll start. I will share a little bit more about my story before I do that and say that, gosh, I would say that my anxiety and depression really started after my first son was born, where I started to really pay attention to what was happening inside of my body, and started to seek regular therapy, and actually ended up on anxiety and depression medication. But during the pandemic itself, I remember a specific moment where again, working as a chief level fundraising officer at a nonprofit here in town, and by the nature of that role, you can imagine how much of a people person I am, and really seek the connection that you're talking about. And I don't think you have to be an extrovert. In fact, I would just love any of the studies or research related to introverts needing that same connection. It's not just about being an extrovert. But I remember the physical manifestation of that anxiety and depression maybe a month into the pandemic, where I was at home with my husband. We were both working from home with our 2 young kids whose preschool had been shut down. And I had never felt more alone. Yet I had these 3 people constantly beside me, but it just felt like it was me against the world. And I would imagine that there are a lot of you in this room that felt the same way. And the world just really didn't have its act together at the moment. It seemed like it was falling apart. And so for me, that's how it manifested. And I can talk about some of the ways now that I start to see that isolation, the effects of the isolation. I think a canary in the coal mine is self-doubt and imposter syndrome and starting to worry that I'm not doing anything right. I know now enough about myself that that's sort of a step one, so that I can get ahead of more of the physical manifestations, and that I could spend more time with my therapist, and I can double down on making sure that I'm doing yoga and I'm taking my daily walks or listening to podcasts or making that really intentional connection with other people. So you've heard just in that bullet list a few of my tools and techniques, but I also know that the most important thing on that list is the connection. And it's taking a minute, even if, this may sound so simple, but hugging my husband during the day, it is really hard to make sure that happens with the hustle and bustle of getting the kids out the door and then getting them to bed at night. But physical touch for me is really important. So a hug with someone that I love. It's calling my sister or a girlfriend just to catch up. I know that one of the things we were going to talk about is just the importance of female friendships and getting through these things. In a work setting, I think it's important to talk about that. For me, it's finding a trusted colleague who I can be vulnerable with and really have an authentic connection and relationship with. Reading, walking, I want to make sure that we call out the privilege that some of the caretaking that we do for ourselves that exists in that. And I know that medication culturally is not always widely accepted. I know that seeing a therapist is also not widely accepted in some cultures. I think a lot of that is due to stigmas for whatever reason. But there are other tools in your toolbox, like the connections with other people and like taking a walk and time for yourself, even if it's just the small amounts of time that you have in your day. I'll stop and let Stephanie talk about it.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was initially drawn to yoga as a new mother. I felt very isolated and alone, even though I did have two little beings around, and my husband was working during the week out of town, so he was there on the weekends. And I think one of the true benefits of taking those classes, which I ended up doing like multiple times a week, was connecting with the people there. And in the yoga community, there is a word called sangha, which means community. And it's more than just the physical aspects of the practice. And I've seen this in my teaching, because I teach at the same yoga studios, in some cases for more than 10 years. And I've seen friendships develop of the community of people coming to the class. Now that COVID is over, people are coming back. They'll sit and have a cup of tea after. They'll talk about their children. They'll show pictures of their grandchildren. And it's a wonderful way to have that sense of community, especially after, as you mentioned, coming out of this long haul where we were alone. And just some of the things Kristen said, there's little things that you can do throughout the day to create a reconnection. For example, during COVID, I had a friend, and we became gratitude buddies. And every day, we would text one another of one thing for which we felt grateful. And sometimes it's like, I got up in the morning, or it was like, I saw, the first tulip of the season, or something like that. And other days, it was something more monumental. And in the same tune, like connecting with people for walks. I had a lot of walking buddies during COVID, and I've continued that for now. There are book clubs and things. It doesn't have to be like an exercise class or something that costs money. There are just going for a walk and appreciating nature, or experiencing something new could be interesting. Maybe it's like an art class or a lecture or an event like this with a friend, to come together in that capacity. So.
Yeah, and Kristen, you mentioned also, the ways that you recognize isolation in yourself too was self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Are there other ways that you recognize with the depression?
Yeah, I think, again, for me, this is going to sound so crazy, but whenever I haven't been paying attention to the early warning signs and that physical manifestation of depression and anxiety happens, I tend to not want to drive over overpasses. And I know that's like when the alarm bells are running off. And I can get over overpasses fine, but it's like it's that manifestation of not trusting myself enough to like drive like a normal person or human being around Austin, Texas. Other ways are, again, I'm going to go back to that feeling of like, it's me against the world. And that when I start to believe that lie, I know that there are some steps that I need to take. I also think that, there's a lot to be said about the things that you can do to improve yourself, but there's only so much control that you have over your environment. And sometimes, Simone, you had mentioned this, like knowing when to go at the beginning of our session. Sometimes you have to change your environment, whether that's physically, like the going outside for a walk, I think has a lot to do, the benefits of that for me have a lot to do with changing my environment and putting me in the world and seeing nature and sunshine. But then also from a work perspective, I mentioned that I have been a nonprofit fundraiser for a long time, and actually this year made the choice to step away from that and do some independent consulting, which has been a good change in environment for me. I think that one of the things that we're going to get to is work-life balance, which I just completely disagree with that terminology. But I recognized that there was only so much that I could do for myself, and improve the things that I was using and keep putting things in my toolkit before I recognized that wasn't going to change everyone around me. It wasn't going to change the pressures and the sort of circumstances in the field that I was in at the time. And so I had to change my work environment in that way. And I'm really proud that I did. But I also recognize, again, that privilege that I can speak with having had a pretty great safety net underneath me and doing that and making a leap. And so I know that that's not necessarily always possible for everybody, but it is certainly something to consider, that you do not have control over everyone else. You can just focus on yourself.
Awesome. All right. And Stephanie, too, can you share a little bit more about, maybe ways that you can check in with yourself to see where you are,
Well, most of us have been conditioned from the time we were young to constantly do. And the question from a parent, or if you're sitting and not really doing anything, is, what are you doing? And nothing is not a good answer, right? You need to be doing something, right? And sometimes, especially if you're in this mode as a caregiver, like, doing makes you feel good. It's like you're kind of, it gives you adrenaline because you're feeling like you're accomplishing a lot. So if you take a moment and you're like, oh, I just want to sit and relax, or, watch Netflix or something, there's almost this feeling of guilt involved with that. But why? Like, why can't we do that, right? So oftentimes it's allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to pause. There's a meditation teacher named Tara Brach. She has a book called Radical Acceptance. We talked about acceptance, right? And she writes about the sacred pause. And she said, what would it be like to take a moment and take your hands off the controls and just tune into your inner being? And we don't really give ourselves the opportunity to do that. So one way is similar to what we did in the very beginning, is just to sit and close your eyes or not and breathe. Tune into your breath. Notice how your body's feeling. Notice the space that's around you, taking you into the present moment, because so often our brains are cluttered with thought, right? So this idea of centering and pausing and breathing, it helps to declutter. I often think of a snow globe, which, like, you shake it up. It has like a little icon. I have one that has a little Buddha and sparkles in it. So when you shake it up, like, all the sparkles float around. It's very pretty, but you don't see the Buddha. But when you settle the snow globe down, the sparkle globe down, everything starts to settle, and then the Buddha becomes clear, right? That's with our mind. If you take a moment to sit and pause and just breathe and tune into your inner landscape, you might experience some clarity, and then that can give you some ability to make decisions, to think more clear, even to check into yourself, and to Kristen's point, like, to say, you know what, I need to take a moment for me today. I need to, take some time for my own self-care before moving on to others. Because it's like that oxygen mask analogy. You've got to put it on yourself before, and I always was, like, amazed at that at first. Like, I don't put it on my child first? No, because you have to take care of yourself in order to give to others.
Thank you. I really love that analogy that you shared with the snow globe. Just settling.
I was looking for one in this.
That was really good.
Yeah. Did you take questions now, or did you want to take? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes, because she has really good things to say, and we definitely want to hear you. Okay. So Joan, can you briefly just share a little bit about, what in a woman's life, what often leads to mental health challenges?
Such a great question. Oh, can you hear me? I want to make sure you can. There's again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. Many of you, as I say these things, will connect to these experiences. I think one significant challenge, which has been lifted up by my incredible co-panelist, is that we receive a lot of societal messages, right, constantly through maybe family and friends, groups we're part of, social media. Even just, sitting maybe in a concert where you're seeing advertisements that we really can do everything all the time, kind of running 90 miles an hour, that we can have that work-life balance, right, that ultimately, when you really break it down, is complex and maybe not as attainable in the ways in which it's presented to us. A lot of the therapy that I worked that I conducted with especially with women was around these expectations they had for themselves, and where they were getting messages from that told them they really should be able to do all of these things. They should be able to wear all of these hats. They should be able to run 90 miles an hour and do it successfully. And if they were struggling in some way, that was a sign of weakness or some deficit in their fortitude or in their resilience. And so a lot of the therapeutic work I did was around reframing and redefining that construct with them to say, actually, you telling me today that you're vulnerable in this therapeutic session is a sign of resilience and strength. And let's talk about a plan. And I will really stress with you today that all of these wonderful strategies we're hearing about will also require you to create a plan. If we wait for that moment, somehow that society is going to give us, where we then get to relax, where we then get to enjoy the Netflix and the yoga and just celebrate ourselves, do something creative, dance, enjoy the company of a friend. Society's not going to give us, there's never going to be that moment where it's like, okay, now Joan, here's your time, right? So it really does require that intentional planning. The other factors that many of you, if not all of us, are familiar with that affect us over development, right, are hormonal changes, changes in our family system, changes in the demands that are put on us as women, and those come from, again, societal, cultural, spiritual expectations and messages that tell us this is the time when you need to plug in a certain way. I was 22 years old and just graduated from undergrad when my family told me that I was the person that should be the caregiver for my mother with stage 4 breast cancer. And being at that age, I thought, well, I guess that's what I should be doing. I never thought to consult with someone about that or to have a discussion maybe with a mentor or someone else, in my family system to say, is this the right fit for me? Not having any knowledge and what I now know around healthcare and being a caregiver. So that's just an example to lift up the advocacy that we must do for ourselves, to really think critically about, is this the right step for me at this point in my life? How do I need to adapt and adjust in ways where I have a self-care plan with some of the incredible strategies that you're hearing about today, so that we don't lose our total sense of self, right? So that we can actually have the oxygen mask on and that we can be effective in those caregiving and supportive roles. There's also hormonal changes, of course, and let's all just sit with those for a moment as women, right? Everybody just take a deep breath. Thank you, Stephanie. Those are often, they go unrecognized or not validated. While our healthcare professionals may say, yes, that's happening for you, and here are some strategies and medications, we might not get that very important validation that we need where someone says, this is really hard. You're not sleeping well. You're not, able to get through your day with the emotional energy you need. And I want to recognize that struggle. A lot of, again, the therapeutic work I did was around saying, how are you doing with these hormonal changes, with these changes in your roles? And I'm a narrative therapist really by background, and so that storytelling is so important. How many times do we get to really tell our story? Right, when you go to the doctor's office, you've got that 15 minutes, where they're like, yeah, okay, let me see, here are your symptoms, here's your prescription, and thank you for coming in today, right? And so to be able to sit down and say, this is what's going on for me, and I need to tell my story authentically to someone and to be validated around all these changes. That was a long answer.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Joan. So, okay, so I'm going to just jump right into that, because that was really good information about life balance. Kristen, this is your area.
Well, you just said it. It's life balance. It's not work-life balance. If work is not a part of our life, then that means it's such a misnomer. We spend a third of our lives, most of us, working in positions at various organizations, and so that's not. It's not the way that I choose to think about it. And It also, the notion that we need to be creating more of it, I think exists in the bigger context of this world of perfectionism that we all live in. There are a lot of just, I'm going to call it out, white dominant norms in our workplaces that really celebrate those who will work around the clock and who will not stop. And the answering the emails late at night and being available 24 hours a day, that's just not sustainable for anybody, let alone people who are sandwiching taking care of kids and also taking care of parents and are volunteering with the PTA and doing wearing again a million other hats. That's just, it's not possible. We need to dispel the myth that it is. I think especially, and Simone, you and I share this, and we've talked a little bit about it, is in the nonprofit sector where we are driven by the causes and missions that we support, that it is maybe overly celebrated that we're not going to stop and we're going to do it at all costs. And I always joke, like, no one's going to tell us to work less. If, they're going to tell us to work more. We got more work to do, and that's clear and apparent in the missions that we serve. But if we do not take stock of what we ourselves need, I think, a big part of this conversation is knowing yourself. It took me a long time to figure out what those physical manifestations that I've described here today were, because it took me taking that pause and stepping back to understand that's what was going on in my body. I think also related to this life balance issue is this notion of asking for help. You mentioned Brene a second ago, number one fangirl right here. Brene also talks about that quality as being one of the signs that a leader is trusted in an organization, is that leader will ask for help. And I think from the perspective of work-life balance, if we're going to call it that, that leaders really play a role there. We have got to change the way that we're leading organizations in a way that offers people the chance to set up boundaries that work for them and their lives holistically. It is not fair, I think, to assume that people can just turn themselves off, turn the personal selves off when they walk through a professional door in some setting.
Okay. Well, Stephanie, I'm going to ask you, what do you think prevents women from asking for help? And how can we retrain ourselves?
Can you hear me okay now? Okay, good. I think it's this sense of feeling like we have to do it all. And, it is an expectation that we've placed on ourselves, but society has also done that too. And it's this burden, and if asking for help seems like a weakness, right? It may expose some vulnerability. And also, I think that there's this need for many people of being in control. And when you ask for help, you let go of some of that control, which can be scary, or maybe it's not being done right. But it's something that over time we have to do because we can't do it all. I almost think like of ourselves, if you think of like the nervous system like a car, and there's an accelerator and a brake. And when we're constantly doing everything, we're constantly pressing the gas pedal and accelerating. And what ultimately happens, like with a car, you run out of gas and burn out, or you get in an accident, right? And for ourselves, that could be illness or depression, anxiety. So you have to push the brake pedal down. And certain techniques like taking a pause, meditation, yoga, mindful movement, going for a walk, connecting with people are means of putting that brake pedal down and taking care of yourself.
So before we go to questions, I have one other question I would like to ask. And this is the role of our female friendships. Okay? How important is that role in a woman's life and for our own mental health?
Yes. I think it's incredibly important. And I'd like to share a story about an experience that I had in observing female friendships, but also becoming a part of it. So I had a friend, somebody I knew reached out to me and asked me if I would teach yoga to a friend of hers and a few of their other friends. Her friend, whose name is Liz, which will become relevant in a moment, she was dealing with stage 4 colon cancer, and she had just had surgery, and they wanted to kind of get her out and about and doing some minimal movement, and she knew I was a restorative teacher. So every week we would meet at Liz's neighbor's house with a group of friends, sometimes family members would come, and we would do what Liz was capable of doing. Some days she could do more of a movement, other days it was more restorative and relaxing. Some days we would just chat. You know, we would talk about celebrity gossip or whatever was going on. And I didn't know it at the time, but this group of friends had put together a fund to contribute money for Liz's self-care. Sometimes it was massage or yoga or whatever she was doing. One day they used to pay me in cash, and one day they gave me a check, and I went to the bank to cash the check, and I looked at the check, and the name on the check for the account was Love Liz. And I just thought that was such a beautiful gesture of friendship. And unfortunately, Liz passed away. And the unique thing is I met Liz when she was very ill, but when I went to her memorial, I got to hear all these stories about her as like a young, vibrant, healthy woman. And I'm still friends with the people, and I still teach the people who were in that group. We still meet regularly. COVID has put a little bit of a pause in it, but still having that connection, which was such a beautiful, memorable experience, that friendship.
I would say, yeah, just for me, it's about connecting with people in the same season of life. And so going to lunch with a girlfriend a couple weeks ago, you know, we spent the whole time, this was for us, but we spent the whole time sort of commiserating about various childhood germs in preschool. You know, like people who really get what's going on in your life in a way that it's hard sometimes. When I am having that moment of connection with my husband, like he's not experiencing the same pressures as a woman that I am. And so it's just really important. And you know what? It took us, this lunch date that I'm talking about, we planned it a month ago. It's not easy, but it is a priority and a commitment and a practice. It's really a discipline to keep connections with your girlfriends. And I would say that a lot of the closest girlfriends that I have don't even necessarily live in Austin, but I make it a priority to connect with them on various text threads that are super long and sometimes inappropriate, but it keeps me laughing. And that is what I think my girlfriends offer, is just like that sense of humor about the things that we're all going through at the same time, and can just take a minute to laugh at. We communicate through memes mostly.
Well, thank you. I want to see if there are any questions virtually. Do we have any questions? All right. Well, what about here in the audience too, if we have any questions for any of the panelists? Okay.
Or you have to know what you're asking. And that's, it's difficult because I've gone through it for many years. One of the things that I asked when my dad had a heart attack way back, out of town, away, like 3,000 miles away from his home, and I had to go, and I was in college, and I called one of my professors and said, I need to put off my test. And she said, can I call your other professors? And that was such a help to me because it saved me time. And it told me the professor really cared about what I was going through. The second one, to your comment, was when my daughter called me and she said, after she had had her second child, and she said, Mom, I really kind of wondered what it would be like to go over the flyover. And I said, I think we need to go see the doctor.
You know what? I'm so grateful for you telling me that, because I've truly thought, and I know that this is what it's about, that I was maybe the only one that ever freaked out about flyovers. Okay, thank you. Okay, see? Thank you.
You're not, and postpartum is not a funny thing to go through, and it happens to everybody differently, and the cry for help is not always heard. We hear it more now, but we didn't hear it before. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. You have another question?
I just wanted to share a word that I haven't heard yet, and it's relentless. I just feel sometimes like it just never stops.
Do you want to touch on that, Joan?
I didn't have a mic.
Oh, sorry.
I have the mic again. Good. I'm so glad you put a word to it. And often, as a therapist, I say, can you tell me a feeling word, right? To help me understand. And so relentless would be a great one. Again, I want to lift up the intentionality that it takes to stop that relentlessness, right? That churning of nonstop responsibility, needs, phone calls, which again, I want to, say are beautiful and wonderful, right? That we are the incredible people and resources and, forces of support for so many as women. And, right, there's no way to sustain that level of engagement and service, and nor should it be expected, as we've heard from our panelists. I think that what happens is we end up in this fight or flight state, which is meant to be temporary, right? It's a protective state if we are in danger. But over time, if we are in that state for too long, our bodies suffer, our minds suffer, and we are not able to really, again, have a holistic sense of well-being. And we are not able to fully engage in our lives in the ways that we want to, and to reach our goals. So the relentlessness, we're not in therapy right now, but I would say that, my response to that is, let's make a plan. How can we make a plan, right? And it can be some of those core, self-care strategies that are easy to access, right? Like the bubble bath and the walk, which are some of my favorites. And it's also about, how do I get back into meaningful activities? How can I be creative? Recently, I've been trying to learn how to play the piano. And this happens to me where I'm like, I should be doing something else. This is so indulgent. This is so frivolous. There's children that need me. There's clients that need me. There's students that need me. And I'm sitting here at this piano. And it's vital. If I can leave you with a message, it's vital, right? And we think about all the developmental stages that women go through, postpartum, some women, menopause, and thinking about how do we shift and pivot and be intentional around making that space. Again, no one's going to ask us, oh, did you need space for self-care today, right? Like, would you like to leave a little bit early? In fact, when I worked in healthcare, it was all, and those of you who worked in healthcare, it was like, oh, are you leaving already? I'm like, well, it's 6 o'clock. I'm actually past the end of my day. You know who you are in this room that I've worked with. And so we really have to advocate. And I say that I'm saying it to myself, even today. Like, I'm going to think about, how do I advocate today for my time at the piano, or my time doing yoga, right? Or all those other beautiful, enjoyable things that are not indulgence. They are vital to our health, just as much as eating that good food, just as much as getting that good night's sleep. Thank you for relentless. We see hands.
So we have one other question that we can take before we close.
As far as relentless goes, I certainly know that because I've worked in healthcare. So, but for me, setting boundaries and saying no. Saying no is so important, and it's hard to do it when it's something that you want to do. But if you just say yes to everything, and you just get run over, and so sometimes you need to just prioritize the things that you really want by saying no to 5 other things that you sort of want.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Thank you. And I did see another hand over there, somewhere in the back. Oh, okay. Great minds. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. So I'm going to ask the panelists to just share some last-minute thoughts in less than a minute? Okay, less than a minute. Okay.
Less than a minute. Boundary setting. I just want to lift up saying no as a beautiful and wonderful thing, and accepting help as wonderful. I think we have to kind of say these things to ourselves, right? That saying I need help is a sign of strength. And that, reframing takes a lot of emotional work. Because again, we're not socialized, most of us, to think of accepting help, engaging in, restorative activities as signs of strength. That is how we demonstrate how strong we are, because then we're ready to plug back in and serve and be creative and generative. All right, I'm gonna follow my time boundary.
I would say that for me, in the moments where I'm not flailing or super stressed out, I do try to make a list of the things that people can do to help me, so that when I am in moments of stress and people say, how can I help? Whether it's with my kids or a work project or a volunteer project, I kind of have some things on a list that I can say, hey, could you take this off of my plate? Because it's so easy to get caught not knowing what to say to people. And the last thing that I'll say that I think is super important is that we have to advocate for each other. That we have to, if you are in a position, again, I'll talk about the importance of leadership, but if you're also in a position of power in any way or privilege, we have to be the ones to create the norms that we want for ourselves. And so we have a responsibility to do that in whatever setting, if it's with your family structure or a work structure, that we all have to take responsibility for advocating for one another in this way.
So coming back to setting boundaries and also creating time for yourself, I think if you ask somebody how they're doing, more often than not, they'll say, I'm busy, right? I'm busy. So one thing, and this is something my husband actually told me, is he's like, if you have something that you want to do, like take a yoga class, put it in your calendar. If you had a doctor's appointment that you made 3 months ago, you're not going to cancel that like you would crossing out, so don't cancel your yoga class. And it's setting that boundaries and saying no if somebody's asking you to bring like 25 cookies to the bake sale or something like that. No, I'm not going to sacrifice my own time to do that, or try to figure out maybe buy it at the grocery store instead, baking them from scratch. But it is really establishing that time, and maybe it's 15 minutes for yourself to sit and breathe, to go for a walk, to watch, half of a sitcom or something like that. But just to take that time in a few moments to take a break, especially if you're caring for somebody else, and take that time for yourself.
Ladies, you all have just been fabulous. Thank you all so much for your wisdom and practical tools that we can use every day to help us help ourselves. So thank you.